Hey everybody, Professor Steins here, and this video is going to be about Entity Framework 6 Code First approach using Model View Controller Framework 5 and .NET. Phew, that was a mouthful. Anyway, in ITAC 4286, where this video kind of fits in, I've asked students to kind of walk through this tutorial that I posted and try to see what they could make work. It's a very good tutorial, and I think it walks through a lot of the components of MVC and .NET very well. And everyone seems to be doing pretty okay trying to mimic it a little bit. There's another tutorial out there from Tutorials Point about a MVC that's actually pretty good, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about it too. So anyway, going back to Code First MVC, I really like the approach that's coming in here, but I'm going to throw a lifeline out to a lot of those students out there that or maybe a little bit new to .NET and want a crash course, or maybe having difficulty pursuing it a little bit on their own. So I'm releasing this video a little bit late because I think it is kind of important that you try to research and build something yourself. So I'm going to walk through kind of how I would do it, some of the things that I encounter that makes it look a little bit better. So anyway, this one pretty much talks about how to make courses and students and enrollments. But in the course, we've been dealing with a news model that kind of mimics maybe a blog application. So right here, there's kind of our three. We're going to kind of create something a little bit similar with a different ERD. So in Visual Studio, up in File, let's create a new project. It should be the first option there. And this is going to be a web project under Visual C#. And we'll make sure that ASP.NET Web Application is selected and that we're using a pretty recent framework, 4.5.2 right here. Suggest trying to use that one as well. We need to give a name for our project. And I'm going to call it KMP. Should probably keep it something short and related to the purpose of the website. KMP is standing for Keith McDonald Plumbing, which is a local business I use in a lot of different classes. So I'm going to use KMP, and that's going to be sort of my my namespace for this application. And I'm going to save it on my desktop. If this over here is checked for application insights, make sure to uncheck it. Don't include that. It'll make it a little bit more complicated. Everything else should look kind of like this, and just click OK. So we're going to get a second window here. And here's where we could really choose what kind of .NET application we want to make. We want to make an MVC application, so that's the one we're going to want to select. We could add some other things into it, but we're not going to do anything with those. We also want to change the authentication type here to be no authentication. This will also kind of make it a little bit easier to get started, and make sure that Azure is checked off. So it should look kind of like this, and we'll click OK. And it shouldn't take too long. It's going to scaffold out kind of a basic application for us. So MVC stands for Model View Controller. And if you, as you're reading through the tutorial, it'll explain a little bit about that. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to a part that's going to be pretty important for us in a little bit. And that is creating the database context. A lot of students kind of struggling in that part right now, trying to create a database context and read out from it. There's a little change, little note down here. I think it would make it a lot easier for all of us. And this one right here is if you're using an older version of Visual Studio, make sure to use a more recent string, and the other one is this attached DB file name. So anyway, here's our application. Came out pretty blank, and we got a little front page to it too. I'm going to close that down though. If we want to figure out how to run this guy, just go over to Views over in the Solution Explorer and open up the Home folder and right click on the index file and view this in browser. So this is going to kick it up kind of in the web server, build the project, and do some other fancy stuff for us. And what we'll get is kind of what we saw there in the little README file that first popped up, because that's what comes out with the basic scaffold. Now, if you're looking for how to kind of edit what comes out here, again, kind of looks like the normal deal here. So what MVC does is what we're seeing here is coming out from these files on the home root. So these are the files that are kind of in this folder. What they are, if we kind of look at them, is just some HTML that associates that one page. If we were looking in something like, went red there for a minute. If we're looking for kind of how the home page layout looks, sort of a master page in web forms, that would be under the shared folder, the underscore layout folder, or underscore layout file. This is where we'll find our doc type, our head tag and body tag. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to build a template similar to a master page. And where this @render body statement is, that's where the different views will get rendered out from. So there's 3 in the home folder, and if you're kind of wondering how does render body know where to inject these pages, that's going to be in the controllers. So in controller, there's a home controller up here, and the default attribute is just to return the index view, and the about page is returning kind of the about view and contact view. That's how it kind of knows how to scaffold those together by using these indexes in our page. By default we're coming to the home page, but /home/about takes us to this view, and contact takes us to this view. Those are wired into the controllers, and we'll see a little bit more about how those work as well. So let's close all this down a little bit, because we're really, what we want to do is we want to build a database so that we can use MVC to store stuff in a database and retrieve it and do things for us. So in the example, what they have you do is create different files to hold what your different entities look like. And so you end up with about 4 or 5 files that define each entity on its own, and then you have to create some other files to use those. I'm going to simplify that a little bit by just going into the models folder and going to add a new item. And we're going to look under the data option over here on the left to choose an ADO.NET entity data model. We're going to want to give that model a name, so down here at the bottom under name, I'm going to give it Newsmaker, because this is going to be our news application, our blog application, just calling it Newsmaker, and click OK. Now we're going to be given some different options here. A lot of students have tried this empty EF designer model when kind of going through the other lab. It kind of looks like it's working for you, but when I'm getting your code, it's not. So I can kind of see how it's working for you, but I can't really open up and edit your EDMX file. So that's why I've been kind of pushing people to Mvc Code First model. This way we kind of build straight off of how we define classes in C#. So we'll choose that option and click Go. And it's going to scaffold a couple things for us real quick. Add some references. And it's going to have this file pretty much built out for us. It's got some cool little comments in it as well. So it's going to make a DB context for us, and to the base it's passing a name called Newsmaker. And what that's going to do is in the web config file, we're going to have a connection string called Newsmaker that thing is going to read and return the connection string to our database. So right off the bat like this, what it's going to do is it's going to create this database kind of off in the netherworld. It's going to exist in what's the thing called SQL Express. And when you zip your folder and send it to me, I don't have that database file. So while I might have a perfectly good working version of your application, I don't have any of the data that you used to test it with. So in some in some solutions, not everybody, but I don't have your data. One way to get around that and to really kind of make sure that you're showing me everything you want to show me is go to the app data folder and create a database, or well, a new item here. And what we're going to choose is an SQL Server database and give it a name. So I'm going to call it Newsmaker DB. I'm missing a period there. So that's going to be my database, and click Add. What we're also going to have to do is right here in this web config file, and that might take a second. What we're going to have to do in this web config file, where the connection string is point to this database instead of the default SQL Express Netherworld database. And to do that, yeah, again, if you might need to change this too, but to do that, we need to add another option here, and that's going to be attach DB file name. So attach DB file name, equals, and a pipe character, data directory, a pipe character, / newsmaker db.mdf. And then kind of make sure you have the semicolon in here. Basically, we're passing another option to the connection string and telling it to use the database that's in the data directory, and that data directory is the app data folder, because that's kind of how a .NET application works. So by adding that option in there, we should be able to use this database now. Now we haven't actually made anything with it yet. I'm just going to hit save and go back to our context here, because we do need to make something that we can put in this database to populate it. So let's look down towards the bottom. There's a little class here that's already commented out. So I'm going to start by creating a class that's going to work in our news application called category. Public class category and curly braces, and set a public data type of int ID, and set some, and yep, that was not the wrong key, right key, curly braces, get and set. So these are kind of creating some default get and set methods for this property. We're going to create some other properties in here as well. Public string name, get and set. So this will give us a name of our property, or name of our category. We could create some other ones as well if we wanted to, like a query string maybe. Public string query string, something that we can pass, or maybe some kind of custom query string we can set. Get and set methods. It doesn't want to use those curly braces today. Get and set query string. And really, it could go on and on. Maybe another integer for cat order. And that way we can have a kind of like a custom ordering method. So that's our category entity. We also need to add a DB set for that entity up here, and there's kind of a commented section as well. So we'll need to, not the two slashes, define a DB set for this category. DB set of type category, and we'll call it categories, plural, get and set, and hit save. So we've actually created a table in the database, believe it or not. Now, we haven't actually created it yet. We're pretty close. What we need to do is go over to the Packet Manager console down at the bottom. If this console doesn't show, then up in Tools, NuGet Packet Manager, click on Packet Manager Console, and hopefully that would open it up for you. So the first command we're going to run here is enable migrations. And if you have problems here, make sure that you do not have anything open in the database, or I probably should have shown it before, because this can cause some serious issues. It's going to check if it exists. Database looks good. So Code First migrations enabled for database. If you happen to kind of double click on it like this and open it up in the Server Explorer over on the right and try to look at tables, sometimes you can get some real issues out of it, so you'll probably always need to come in here and hit close connection. And I'll show that a couple more times, I'm sure, because it can be kind of a pain. So we enabled migrations and that seemed to be okay. So let's try to run update database. Update database, update dash database. So what this is going to do is it's going to go through and look at our entities and try to set stuff. Oh, we did kind of miss a step. So one of the things when we ran the enable migrations command, we got a migrations folder, and in that folder we have a configuration.cs file. This is where your seed method is going to be, where we can add data in the future, but we do probably need to change this option right here for automatic migrations enabled and set that to true. That way that'll do away with this error that's down here at the bottom. The other one that we're going to probably want to go ahead and add is automatic migration data loss allowed, and also set that to true. That way if we do something trying to scale our data, especially here in the beginning, it won't throw errors for us down at the bottom. I think we can run update database and maybe force here. Or maybe not have to include the force, but it should work this time. And if it did, then when we double click on our database and go back to our table and hit refresh, what we're going to get is our scaffolded out entity. And really kind of no data in it either. We haven't really added anything into the seed method yet. But that database, that table is created for us and sort of ready, sitting ready, waiting for data. Now put some data in there. Pretty neat, right? What's also neat about it, and what we really need to do, add a little bit in here first, I guess, is looking at the seed method and the configuration CS file. There's an option, there's some commented out code that shows how the seed method can work. And so we're going to try to copy that and add some new categories to our database. So let's do context dot categories dot add or update. My parenthesis, break that down, put a semicolon there. P, and we're going to map P to p.id. That's the primary key of the field. So the first one we're going to pass is sort of a way that we can map a given category to its primary key. After that, we can create some new categories. Now it's kind of wanting us to use models.category there, but if we just type in new category, sort of like what's going on up there at the top, and you hover over it, show potential fixes, we'll get an option here to use kmp.models. What this is going to do, this is going to add a reference up here at the top for the namespace. So that way we should be able to reference it without the models.category. And category, we're going to want to map in the different fields. So if we just kind of backspace and hit space, we're going to have the different options to throw in fields. So ID equals 1. We'll say the name of this category is going to be music. And comma, the query string, maybe just music in all lower quotes. Cat order is going to be 3. Put a comma at the end of here. We can create a new category. We're basically just kind of adding categories in a list here, and can make us a new category. Name equals sports. Query string, maybe sports in all lowercase. Cat order is 2. And really we could scaffold in a lot of test records pretty quick. ID equals 3, just to sort of get our application off the ground. It gives us a pretty good way to deal with our entities too. So music, sports, games, query string, kind of running out of categories we want to use. And cat order is 1. We'll probably also want to run context.save changes here. That way we know this data can run into the database. So let's go back to down here at the bottom in the Packet Manager console and run update database again. And this time it's going to run through and if we changed our models at all, see, I told you, it's going to, if you get this error about it being in use, it really just, something about this thing just does not like being watched. So you need to go up to your database here in Server Explorer and go to Close Connection. Also make sure that you don't have any tables open up here at the top, and I'm probably going to end up doing it again by mistake. So just run update database again. This time it should work. It just does not like being seen, I guess. So if we open up tables again and do a refresh on our table to show table data, now we have our 3 records already sort of spliced in, ready for us. So we're going to close this down and make sure that we close our connection here again. That way if next time we're ready to run update database again, it should work okay. And make sure that that's the right one. Yeah, it looks like it. I don't know why this one is let's see, I'm going to delete some connections here. Let me make sure I'm getting the right file. Just want to make sure that right, yeah, okay, we're writing it out to the right table. It's weird that I had 2 in there. Interesting. Another one of the benefits of putting it in the app data folder and making sure that you put attached DB file name there. That way your database is a little bit more tangible. If it was out there in the netherworld of SQL Express, we would have just deleted our database. So let me make sure I close connection there. Yeah, okay. So back to here. Let's go back to Newsmaker CS because we have one category. We have one entity sort of scoped out for us, but we did have a couple other entities in our ERD that we were working with, and it's probably best to start a little bit on the fringes of the ERD. So we had a class equals category. I guess I should put it maybe below. Oops, took out one too many. So we had a public class category, and we also had a public class permission brackets, and this one would also have a public int ID and get int set, and a public string, some sort of perm level, get int set, or int, and a name, public string name, get int set. We've added this, added in this category. We also need to add in a DB set up here for it. Public virtual, and this is going to be a DB set of permission called permissions, and we're going to get and set that. So all of our databases are closed, and we did close it out last time. So if we come back over here and hit update database again and try to run it, it should work this time. Hopefully. So still ran the seed method, double click on the database and refresh the tables. We should see our new permissions table here with its different properties all scaffolded out. which is pretty neat. Let's close that down, make sure we get everything closed. We can go back to configuration.savechanges now and add us in some new context for permissions, add or update, semicolon. And same thing, we're going to try to map the p value to p.id, which is the primary key, by creating some new permissions. New permission. And we'll need to statically set some options here too. So id equals 1, name equals writer, or we'll start with guest maybe, and perm level is 0. Oop, I didn't mean to put a comma, so we can add a new permission and scope that one out as well. id equals 2, name equals writer, perm level is 1. You kind of get the idea. id equals 3. So need to add our context save changes. I kind of like to add this in a lot because if we didn't happen to make some sort of mistake in here, category would still run. I think context.savechanges will actually save it to the database. This will just kind of add it to the entity on the fly. We actually need this to save it statically to the database. Save all changes made in this context to underlying database. I'm saving it twice here instead of, and this would work if we took this line out, but if there's an error, we wouldn't know where it failed. So by running multiple times, we can see categories worked, but permissions failed. So anyway, let's run. Did we run update database already? I don't know. Let's check. Show table data. Looks like we did not. So let's make sure the connection is closed and run update database again. You could get a little bit more picky in the migration methods, and that's kind of what the tutorial out there is doing. So now we got our those three all wired in, so that's good. Cool, cool. Let's jump out of that for a second, and we'll come back to it to deal with some more complicated modeling. But a nice thing about MVC and Visual Studio, to be honest, is we had the home controller that points out to the different home pages where that image is linked in. Well, we just defined a whole bunch of data, and we'd really like to be able to edit that data somehow. So we can really just right-click on controllers and try to add a new controller here. It's going to give us some neat little options that we can use. And I'm going to choose the option here, MVC5 controller with views using Entity Framework. So this is I'm going to hit add. The model class that we're looking for here is going to be a type of category. Let's just start with category. And the context class is going to be our newsmaker. That's from our base in the newsmaker.cs file. The other options here are all okay. Although if you wanted to use a different layout page, you could. By default, it's going to use in the shared folder that underscore layout folder, because that's the one that is in the view start file. So we'll click add. It's pretty neat what it's going to do for us. It's going to build out the create, read, update, and delete web pages that we need to edit this entity. And it's going to do it for us pretty automatically too. So Visual Studio doesn't decide to crash on us. Get a sip of water. Cool. So if we look in controllers, we have a different controller now, categories controller. And you can see the namespace. It's going to make a new instance of Newsmaker, and that's coming from our Newsmaker CS file. So it's taking that DB context, and it's making a new local variable for that. Then we have a bunch of methods here: index and details, create. And what these are going to do, they're going to point to different pages, different views that got scaffolded out as well. And there's kind of a lot of them in here, but what these are going to do are give us our create, read, update, and delete. So this is when we go to the create page, and the create page creates a post back to the server. It's going to include some values that we need to save to our data model. And just like how we had save changes on the data context in configuration CS, we're saving those changes to this new instance of DB, which is going to be our DB file that's in app data. So let's look down a little bit, and here they all are. There's in the views folder, there's now a categories folder, and the categories folder is going to have our different views all laid out. So we can right click on index and just click right click on index and view in browser. That's going to open it up for us in Firefox here again. So we're still going to have the scaffolded pages that came pretty basic with .NET. And they give you a Bootstrap framework off the bat as well. So really, you just kind of have to go in and start editing the template and some of the basic pages. But see, look what got created for us here. We now have a categories page. Lists out all the categories. And we can hit the edit button to make changes to our database. So we can do that. We can create a new category for cars or something and give it some sort of custom ordering and add it to our database. And that data is going to show up in our app data file. So our database, and we take a look at categories and show table data. It's right there. It's pretty neat, right? So it can get a little bit hairy. See how we're sending for the create method. We're sending the post. We're passing in these values. It can get a little bit crazy, and that's why I want to jump over to web forms a little bit. Because if we came back to category and decided, well, we want to add a new string in here for probably some sort of image. We'll call it, I guess, image link, get and set. So this would be a URL to some image that we want to use. And then maybe public string image alt to be the alt text that needs to be associated with it. I don't know. So let's try to run update database again and see what happens. So seed method actually worked, believe it or not, even though we changed the category entity a little bit. It just kind of sort of inserted nulls into all the field tables there. But we could go back and change how those are worked by going back to configuration CS and looking at our entities. We just would need to come in and add default text. Probably should do image link first. I'm just going to use hashtags here. An image alt, some description. And stick that for each category. Hit save. Make sure that this guy is closed. We were looking at table data. Again, does not like being looked at when it's changing its close. So update database, it should work. Hopefully. Seed method has run. Look into categories again. Now, these three all updated with the new values. The one that was there before did not. So, but really we could just kind of delete that row. So pretty neat. Okay, let's see. Let's get a little bit more complicated in our entities. So we got kind of two entities out, and we showed how the scaffold works. Let's go back to Newsmaker CS. Close that one down. I think we're done with web config. So we have two entities here. We have a category, we have a permission. We also are going to have maybe an author, public class author. Someone has to write all these news articles that we're trying to create. And we'll call that public int ID for a primary key, get and set. Public string, I'm calling my first name, get and set. I actually like 7 kind of capital letters there. Public string last name, get and set. Public string permission level. Well, let's just go with slug, some kind of saying or something that they can keep. We'd also want to probably come in and put a username and password at some point. Probably don't want to let it get too complex. It's just sort of an example. Public string password, get and set. But really, each person that uses our table is going to have a type of permission associated with it. So I'm calling them class authors, but there's going to be a relationship here, and an author is going to have one permission. A permission can be related to multiple authors. So the first part of that relationship is that public int author ID, or author, sorry, author. No, what am I thinking? Author and author. Public int permission ID, get and set. So what this is going to do is this is going to set an integer that's going to be in our table, and you got to be a little bit careful because MVC is going to do some auto mapping here as well, because we've used a class that's in the same scope level. It's going to try to map this in automatically to this one's ID. We have to kind of make sure that we want to do that by also specifying public virtual permission get and set. So what this is also going to do, because of the naming convention that we're using here, it's going to automatically sort of map together this foreign key relationship back to the permission table. And so by putting in this, by making it this way, we're going to see permission being a foreign key in this table. Another way to look at that is that permission is going to also have sort of a virtual collection, iCollection, and we're going to have to write that out and use potential fixes using system.collections. There's going to be a virtual collection of type author called authors, plural, on the permissions, and we can get and set those. I think that's iCollection of author type authors. Oh, I think I used the wrong include statement. Using system collections generic. I can probably need to go up and. Oh, I just didn't get further down in the package import. Yeah, okay. So permission will also have sort of a virtual collection of authors that are associated to it. So there's our one-to-many relationship. A permission is related to many authors, but an author only has one permission. So the author has one permission. The permissions has a list of authors. It's pretty much straight off of our ERD that we created to sort of model how that works. I probably should have that ERD up so that we can look at it, but I think once we extend this concept a little bit from author and actually make our article entity, public class article, it will also have an int called ID, and we'll want to get and set that. It'll probably have a string call for headline. Every article has a headline, and we can get and set that. Articles usually have some sort of summary of associated with them or two with them as well, so we can get and set that. There could also be we'll just put in string for full text, some sort of the whole article. Yeah. We're also going to have to make, because article, looking back at the other entities that we created here, and we need to, before we get off to base, we need to make sure that we also add these items to the DB set. So we did not add author, type of authors, and get and set. And since we've already made out the articles, we can go ahead and add it as well. DB set type article called articles, and get and set. Now they're all exposed to out there to the database. So let's see if I can make this down a little bit. So an article is going to be written by one author. So that again is kind of a one-to-many relationship, is that an article is going to be written by one author, but an author can have written many articles. So just sort of how those worked, that's also going to work here. An article is going to be written by public int. We need the integer of the primary key to that to the other table. So that's a public int author ID, get and set, and then we'll want to make sure that MVC knows that we also want this to be a virtual. That's going to be a virtual path of type author, and we're going to call it author in our local context. So in this way, we can find the author that was written for this article. Just like for permissions, we created a collection to see how many authors are under a given permission. We should also add a public virtual iCollection of type article called articles, get and set. That way for each author we can find the different articles that they're associated with and change those. Article is also going to be given a category. So public int category ID, get and set. And that is going to also be a virtual path to a category type, local name of category, get and set. And if we ever want to find out, by a given category, what articles are associated with it, we also need to create a virtual path on category. And that's going to be a public iCollection of type article called articles, get and set. So we wrote a lot out there since the last time we ran our database. Let's make sure that we close connection here. We have no tables open, and let's go ahead and just run update database right now. That way we can hopefully be sure that all these entities look pretty okay. And it looks like they are. Let's go over and right click on tables and do refresh. This will show all of our new tables here. Let's take a look at the articles table by right click and open table definition. So the articles table has two foreign keys in it. One foreign key is for the category that it has, and the other foreign key is for the author that wrote it. So when we look at the design view here to see what MVC scaffold into our database, uh, we can see the raw SQL that it's sort of creating for us on the fly, including the primary key here. Entity, it's setting it to an integer, auto-incrementing by entity. Scroll down just a hair, and here's there's our primary key. Here's all our mappings into the foreign keys to the other tables. Now, if you were to kind of look at categories, which only has that I collection and open table definition, you're not really going to see that relationship there. That's why we have to sort of define it in the models. So all of our database looks pretty scoped out, and we'll just need to close this connection so it doesn't get mad at us again. Let's go back to configuration.cs. So I'm going to do this after, keep going down. So after we've added some categories and we've added some permissions, we also need to try to add us in some authors and add or update. Put a semicolon. We're going to take the entity P and try to map that to PID, the primary key. And we're going to make a new author. And we need to kind of statically set his options here. So ID equals 1, that's his primary key. First name is going to be Darth for Darth Vader. And last name is going to be Vader. It's pretty neat how as you keep going down the line here, it's only giving you the ones that you haven't used yet. So maybe username is admin, and password is admin, and we're slug is join me. Sort of all the kind of the blank staticky fields there. Now, and remember, each author is going to have a type of permission associated with them. And if we hit space here, one is that we can see the collection for articles. We're not really worried about that yet. The other thing that we can see is permission and permission ID. So these two are actually objects. And we could try to map them to there, but that would be too hard. Instead, we'll just do permission ID. And we'll look back at this permission, and we'll say Darth Vader is going to be a writer. So we'll give him an ID of permission ID of 2. So I'm going to copy this line and come back to the end and put a comma. That way we can create us a second author, and this one's going to be our admin, permission of 3. And his slug will be never. And we'll give him a different username and password. User. And what's his last name? Skywalker. And his first name is Luke. And he's going to have a primary key of 2. So let's save that. Database is closed. Tables are all closed. Let's update database here and see what we get. Hopefully it'll work. Give me a sip of water. The real benefit of MVC is one that you can be very flexible with your entities, especially in the beginning. But even when you have a fully fledged application and your models need to change because some new law passes or something like that, it can be pretty easy to change the model, which auto changes the database and populates in your data. See, it even kind of made those mappings there. Pretty neat, right? Let's go back to Solution Explorer real quick because we want to show a little bit more power. Go back to controllers. So we made a controller out there for categories. It would be really neat to see what would get scaffolded if we tried to add a new controller now based on our authors entity. So let's hit save here. We're going to use the same MVC controller there. click on that. This one's going to be the author entity. Everything else pretty gets auto-populated. You might need to check, make sure you get Newsmaker there. That should be all okay. Click Add. So it's going to create us a new controller for authors, and it's going to scaffold out similar to it did for categories, a views folder that contains the CRUD pages needed for authors. And in the controller, if we wanted to kind of change data coming in or validate it a little bit stronger, we could. But let's take a look at authors and do a lookup here. View in browser. It might give me a, I got a feeling it's going to give us a problem because I didn't close out our database. Let's see if it does. Again, that database, I don't know what it is, but it is not like being looked at. You need to close out that connection. It didn't seem to cause a problem that time. So there's our, look how the name. The name is not writer. Those are the permissions. That's the name on permissions. There's our values for first name and last name though. And what's really neat is we hit edit here. We could change the permission level for them. Set them to be a guest instead. And then Darth Vader is now a guest. That's pretty neat. In the models, we could kind of mess around with. And say, that's kind of weird that it let me do that without. I must have closed it and it was okay with it. So let's go back to Newsmaker CS. Actually, we got article already scoped out. So let's maybe try to throw in a little bit of, or we could. We don't have to. Let's see. Let's just scope it first. We're not going to scope any articles in. We could. Let's just add a new controller and use our MVC5 controller with views, and go ahead and just scope in our article model. Click Add. In a large application, having everything in Newsmaker CS is probably not a good idea. It probably is good that you start, putting them out on different, out there on different things. Let's see. Let's look at articles controller. Scoped it all out for us. Let's see. There's our view bag passing in author.v, and it's pulling in a list of categories and authors for us. Pretty neat. So let's go down to where articles is at and take a look. Probably not going to be any in there by default. We didn't put any in the seed method. Come on, buddy. And sip of water. Yeah, you're kind of just limited by how you define your database. I can change the author ID, who is what. Go ahead and submit it. It's all sort of there. It's really fancy. There's still a lot of work to be done to open the menus to change those and get yourself off of the basic default Bootstrap website. Start giving it a little bit more design and a little bit more look. Like I said, most of that's going to come in through the shared folder to underscore layout. That's going to be sort of your master page equivalent from web forms. Your scripts file will be where all your JavaScript is, and you can add a new one of your own. And your CSS files are going to be up in content. So that's where your site.css file is with some not not too much, but a little bit of basic style going on. But you just take that out and start putting your own in. And fonts are sort of glyphs can come in from Bootstrap. Really, really a lot to be done. The another thing that would be kind of neat, I had it pulled up here at the very beginning and showed it. Tutorials point, again, another good website for looking through and kind of seeing all the different options that are available. A long way down, there's a thing in there about data annotations. So it was kind of weird when we were looking at that one page, and that goes in Firefox, right? Yeah. So we were looking at, I just could do a, go back to views. I was looking at authors and take a look. And the scaffolds aren't meant to be your full application. It's just kind of a way to get something out there so that you can start taking a look at kind of what it looks like. So it's kind of pulling out name. That's coming from the table. Newsmaker CS permission. So that's where name is coming out, because that's the name of the field that's being shown. If we wanted to sort of add a data annotation to it, I'm pretty sure that's a column that we're looking for. Some examples down here, or not column, order. Not timestamp required, new. Oh, I guess it is column. That's sort of what we're looking for, first name. And it's probably going to throw us out a red thing. I think we're going to have to do to import this data annotations schema. I'm going to set that to permission. Hit save. I think that's all we need. Parentheses. I'm thinking VB. That's what I'm thinking. So we'll take a save, we'll take a build. I'm not sure we have to go and change the controller or rescaffold stuff out. I think the way that the razor syntax is going to work is this is hopefully going to work for us. If not, we got a quick little workaround for it. Again, the scaffolded code is just there to help you out. I guess it doesn't like. We changed the entity, so I guess we got to run update database again. I guess that worked okay, so we'll hit refresh and see if we didn't get a better display there. So I'm not sure that was going to change it. Well, the cheap and easy way would be to go down into views, where authors is at, open up the file, and just change, take out the razor syntax and just put in your own for permission. Although I'm pretty kind of wondering why that didn't work. I think thought there was like a display for or title. Could give us some code hinting. Anyway, that was kind of the point of you coming out and playing a little bit with it also. Coming out here trying to use some of these data annotations. I was pretty sure that was column we were looking for, but could be off a little bit. Anyway, a lot to learn about ASP.NET, MVC. Feel free to kind of come out, play around with stuff. The scaffolding stuff is really neat, although you can come and create different controllers of your own. You don't really have to build them straight off of a data model. You can create a new controller and just an empty controller. Call it what you want to. Uh, Maybe we just want to make some static pages that list something. And we can do that by set and view. So it created us a controller with it's returning a view. If we look down here, it didn't actually create the view for us this time with any of the scaffolded things. But if you just right click on index here and do add view, it's going to populate that jobs folder with a new entity, and you can choose to try to throw some data model to it if you really wanted to, or give it some templates for creating or adding or updating or deleting. But you don't have to. You can make it an empty model. Use the layout page. Click OK. You could also import some other data or something like that and add it to the view bag. That way it does get passed. But this page should come back and work. View in Prox browser. So .NET's really rich. Lot to learn. It's a very advanced framework. Takes a lot of coming in here and scaffolding things out. And to be honest, I probably don't know it quite as well as I should. And you can just kind of go to town making your own HTML if you want to. Partial pages are really neat too to explore. Put those in the shared folder so you can reuse them. If you really want to get advanced, another way is web API. This would be a good place to get started with that. So you can make this application, but then expose a web service. Now it's kind of starting over from scratch, but it's going to follow a little bit like how we're doing here, except that when you take your data, you're going to return it as XML or JSON or something like that, and then you can write some JavaScript to read it and write it out. Make a very share an API, a JSON-based API. Really a lot to learn. Even the other pages in here too. So, like I said, I really like this tutorial, and it does really well to go through some stuff. If you've made it this far in the video, hopefully maybe you can see why maybe some of what I'm trying to do maybe is a little bit simpler than what's going on here. Didn't really have to edit the web config file as much to set up the auto update there. Using this connection string is super helpful. Now we have a tangible database that we can talk about. It's not just out there in the netherworld. And I can actually see your data. And kind of watch through the scaffolding process a little bit. And like I said, I think everybody's doing pretty well to experiment with the framework. But I know a lot of people want to see maybe a little bit of direction of what I'm looking for. So this would be the basic CRUD functionality, making kind of your own page up from scratch even. You can change the route data, what's going on in here. That's going to be up in the start route config. So you can change that sort of default behavior for controller action ID, or maybe get home going a little bit faster so you don't necessarily have to use home for the home page. So there is a W3 Schools doesn't really have a great tutorial on MVC itself, but it does sort of have a good tutorial on the Razor markup. So there are the ASP tutorials are a little bit dated from a long time ago. We're not really dealing with regular ASP pages anymore. Even web forms is kind of starting to get out of practice. MVC is definitely popular, and then of course creating APIs is really popular too. There are a lot of different versions of MVC. Maybe there is did they add one for MVC? No, I don't really see it. Good stuff down here though on ADO objects. It's kind of similar to working with a lot of Microsoft Word programs and stuff like that. Where we lost the, oh, that's all classic ASP. So web page is a little something a little bit different, but it does use this Razor syntax. We're more using the actual Razor syntax, so this will start looking a little bit familiar, and it's a kind of a mix of old styles kind of brought in with new languages. So it works really well for us in this MVC framework because we're sending a lot of data from the controller to the view, and so a lot of these messages are going to be related to that. And there is a Razor syntax for VB as well. Yeah, I didn't think there was one in there for MVC. A little bit of one in there for Razor syntax. You know, you can check different properties from your view bag and display something out from it. So get out there, play with it. Encourage you to play with it. Hopefully, if you feel like you were dragging, this shows you a little bit about what the power of MVC can be. And it's just going to take a lot of practice to get familiar with it, build stuff out, change your ERDs around, build an application with a different ERD. So, you know, take another small, build out an ERD in Visio and try to build you out a different ERD and link it all together, fill it up with some data, see what you can make of it. Anyway, hope you enjoy the video and hope you enjoy ASP.NET MVC. Have a good one. Bye.